I think it's also really odd sometimes that we think that all learning has to be maximized up until the age 18 or 21 when we know that their brains are still developing until 25. There's just so much more time still to capture some of that learning, and kids could still be making gains in their reading as they get
Leanne,
more
don't
developed.
say that. When we reach 1 million people, they're going to say we have to keep them until 25.
I'm okay with
They'll
it
be like,
being a
schools, you should
free.
do this.
Welcome to Spedsplaining, where special education gets decoded one case at a time. I'm Stefan, a former classroom teacher and current instructional coach, and I'm joined by three brilliant minds in special education, Darcy, Anna, and Leanne. Each week, they take real stories, often from right here in Washington, and break them down into plain language. We use these stories as a launch pad to explore the wild, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating world of general and special education. Whether you're an educator, parent, advocate, or just curious about how the system really works, we've got you. Let's dive in.
Okay, we are going to talk about graduation. It's one of my favorite topics because I say all the time, for our students with disabilities, the goal is not just graduation. The goal is gainful employment, and why our transition plans are so vital to kids and being able to survive the adult world, which is not easy. And you don't ever have to tell them because they're going to figure it out all on their own. So recently we saw, and our group was texting about a current case that's coming up about a gal who graduated from high school and left, and kind of is calling that 4 years later or 3 years later sort of a fail for her, because she went to a university. She graduated with, I think it was the 3.8. And couldn't read or write, so had to take remedial classes in college, which cost additional funding. And so she's got college debt now and still not employed. So it was kind of us texting and going, what's happening with this graduation thing? So on that, I picked a graduation case to talk about today. So first of all, for all of our listeners who are not in the secondary world, Stefan, do you know the 3 things you need to graduate from high school?
Just like generally, gen ed?
Yep.
I should know more about this. Is one of them a high school and beyond plan?
Yes.
Nailed it. Another one is you need to complete a specific pathway. Right?
Excellent. That is correct.
Because it was
need
just a couple of years ago in Washington, they added a bunch, and that had some implications on master schedules, how you were coding things, because you could get your science credit through ag science, which is technically CTE, but the idea was to give kids more of an opportunity. I think it was a good shift. I think that was cool. And the third is... Oh, I really feel like I should know it. I'm going to feel real dumb when
you do know it.
It's a pulse.
It's kind of the most basic one out of the 3. You have to get a number of
credits.
Ding, ding.
Credits. Which that's funny because I'm pretty sure that was the only requirement to graduate in Colorado. So I just had to hit a certain number of credits, and in certain
back in the day.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you still have to get the required amount of credits in certain classes, right? So much English, so much math, all of those is remaining. So that's kind of the base foundation that people are familiar with. And then the approved graduation pathway. So there's a whole bunch now. There's CTE is a really common one, right? Because that is kind of thinking more about what are you going to do after graduation? Let's get you a skill. So we see lots of things like, our not work source was what I was going to say. What's in Moses Lake?
Skill source.
Skill source. Where kids can not do the dual credit piece, but they can go and actually get like a welding certificate and a CNA and all of those kind of things. So CTE is a really big pathway for a lot of kids. ASVAB, testing, those sort of things are that new shift that we had around 2019 when that happened, which kind of caused everybody to go, how are we coding things? Do they meet these certain pathways?
Were you thinking like CV Tech? Is that
CV Tech? Thank you.
Oh, I did not know what you were talking about.
And then basically, if all of those things happen, then the school district says you are officially ready to graduate, and we graduate you and we code you in our student information system as GD, which is graduated. And so, for example, this girl wants to come back, right? Like, I want to come back and go through your transition program. Well, she is stamped GD, which is graduated. Basically, once that happens, you may never come back. So this is going back to the ND and Reichtel case, which happened recent, like 3 or 4 years ago, where what happens with this diploma and kids age out of the IEP system. So at 21, we used to say, if you turn 21, that's school year, then that's the end of your school career. And at 22, you go, and we might wait, like the credit thing for a lot of our kids. They could have like 40 credits and you need 29 to graduate if they stay for another year, right? So the credits is not so much of an issue as it is completing a pathway and that high school and beyond plan and having something to do after. So with the Reichtel case, the student said, hey, I'm 22. You let gen ed students come back at 22. Why can't I come back at 22? And so that case was found that we do need to let students stay until 22 if you are a student with a disability and have an IEP and really not finishing that high school and beyond plan, which is part of our IEP transition plan. So those two kind of coincide and live together. So this student came back. Districts had to send letters out to everybody and say, your student might still qualify. We owe you compensatory ed. And they had to meet with all of the kids that left in that age 21 who had not officially graduated. So this family came back and said, well, you graduated my student, but you shouldn't have, because not only were they 21, right? I want comp ed, but they shouldn't have actually graduated my student because the high school and beyond plan didn't do them any good, and they need to come back to school. So kind of this is more of the discussion rather than the case, because I'm guessing that you guys can figure out what the court said about the family that came back and said, I want comp ed.
Sorry, just to clarify, is this the one that's like currently going on that we were talking about, or you found a different one?
This is a different one. This was one that came back after. So it's kind of like, we see this current one, what's going to happen? And I'm like, and here's one that's already played out.
Gotcha.
If the student was marked graduated, the kid's not coming back. That's my theory. And the parents had time to talk about graduation date during the process, where every IEP we talk about expected graduation date, because it's usually a topic that they can stay longer, and the team has had that conversation.
So
I think this kid was 21.
So they were aging out, but the district marked them as graduating.
Yep.
I guess I would have that question of, to Leanne's point of, were they talking about graduating in all of those IEP meetings, or were they talking about staying until you aged out? And the district just coded it differently at the end.
They have the IEP that said that they had a graduation date.
Then I agree. I think they're not coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it, right? Like if you've gone through the process, you've hit these different things, you've talked to the parents, you've said graduation, they get coded as graduated. Nope.
Yeah. Graduation in Washington State is an official, you are done and cannot return.
No reversing it.
No reversing it.
Because it's not a one-time decision. Starting when your transition plans are required when you're 16, used to be 14, right? And you could start them earlier, but it's not required until you're 16. But that conversation started at 16. So this kiddo's had, or the family at least, I'm assuming the child was invited to the meetings, but they've been involved in these conversations since they were 16 of what the next step can and should be, assuming there were no procedural errors on district side.
They did not even look into procedural errors in this case, interestingly enough. They said, thank you, but according to the district, if you meet these things and the district says you're graduated, you are done. And in Washington State, you can graduate early, you can graduate late, you can graduate all the way up to 22. But once we press that button on the school system, they're done with school. Which to my question is like, is graduation the end all and what kids need when we're having those discussions? And are we really having those in-depth discussions with families and kids?
No is the easy answer for that. Right?
You can always do better.
And from a gen ed perspective, it's like, hey, you're about to go from, you got to raise your hand to go to the bathroom to see ya. You are on your own, like go get a job, go to school. Like it is a tough kick in the pants, which is what, like, having worked as an instructional coach in the high school and kids not taking those high school and beyond plans seriously, because kids don't take anything seriously. I'm like, these are amazing. Like the fact that you're having this conversation starting in 7th grade, they were doing them. Like you are reflecting, you are thinking, you are planning, at least you're supposed to be, and you're putting it all in writing and you're capturing it. Like this is amazing. But I only think that because I have hindsight and was bailed out constantly by supportive parents, and eventually a future wife who liked to hang out in the library because she's a dork. So is graduation the end all be all? And is that what we should really be shooting for? No, but like, I think Washington is moving in the right direction for like the high school and beyond plan and those multiple pathways, because it gives kids the opportunities to be having the conversations around what they actually want to be doing, especially when like, who knows when people listen to this and what generative AI is like around then, but like, this is the gen ed perspective, I think more, but like the job market is shifting and changing so much as technology shifts and changes a lot, like providing opportunities for doing something, to having a connection right as you leave high school, I think is just good. Because how many people just get lost in that like 18 to early 20 years without a disability, just because you're kind of wandering and still figuring yourself out and your brain isn't fully developed, and it used to be so easy. Well, graduate high school, like the message used to be so clear and linear. Graduate high school, go to college, get a job. It's never been that clear, I don't think, if you've got a disability. But if your question is specifically for kids with disabilities, should graduation be the goal? I would guess no, and that's the purpose of the transition plan, right?
Well, and I think like from what I've read on this current case that's going on, the family had previously done a due process stating a denial of FAPE, but ALJ found in favor of the district. So now what's current is they're going after like the diploma itself, saying that like you you guys passed her without foundational skills, so your diploma is meaningless. Like your meaning of graduation is meaningless because you have graduated a student that doesn't have the skills to be successful.
And I think of the flip side of that too is, to the, as Stefan said, the undeveloped mind. Telling an 18-year-old that they're going to come back to high school for another year, like nails on the chalkboard to age myself, right? I mean, that's not a conversation they're interested in, but I think it's also not a conversation they're interested in because of the structure of high school, and they've already done it. I don't want to go back and sit through 7 classes a day, work for the grades. Like, that's not meeting that need. And I think that's the opportunity I think sometimes we miss in the traditional high school setting for those kids, that versus the kids who are very academic, are going to sit through the classes, are going to do the calculus and all of those kind of things. But we also have a population of, if we can give kids skills, they might not love welding or doing a journeyman of some kind or plumber or whatever that next is. That may not be their forever life, but they have a skill and a livelihood. Right? I mean, how many people know what they want to do when we write their transition plan? They're like, I'm going to be a guitar player. Yeah. Like all the things. And yes, they may. And what are you going to do until you actually get there where that's actual gainful employment for you?
When I was in high school, I think it was my junior year, we had to do, I wasn't like I think it was a version of a high school and beyond plan, but it was like an assignment type of thing in a class. And I was so mad. We couldn't write it on what we wanted to do. Because I knew when I was in first grade, I was going to be a teacher. Like my whole life, I had a plan for what I wanted to do. Yeah, first grade.
I told you.
And it's obviously morphed, right? But I knew forever what I wanted to do. But we had to take this test, and it told us what we were going to do, and that's what we had to write, right? This thing on. And I don't even remember what it was, but I remember it wasn't a teacher, and I had to write this college and beyond whatever plan of what I was going to do. And I'm like, this is so stupid. I don't want to do this. I've known forever, right? Like for some kids, I remember thinking, well, that's great because that kid's a loser. He doesn't know what's going on with his life. Like this is really helping him, but I know what I want and I can't. They're not allowing me to go forward with it. And I think there's just such a way to be in the middle. Clearly, I'm still upset about it, even though that was 20 years ago.
I'm surprised you don't remember what fake job they wanted you to do with all welding.
It was something, it was still in some sort of helping people field, but it wasn't. I don't know. I don't remember.
It was probably you'd be a great behavior analyst. She's like, screw that. I want to be a teacher.
I'm never doing that.
I'm sure it was social worker or something like that. And that's half of who I work with these days. But I remember going up to my teacher and saying that I want to be a teacher. Can I not write it on that? And they told me no.
Well, that is way so to not listen wrong. I'm going to say that was wrong move. We got to pick what we did ours on. So that doesn't make sense. Even though we did also take the aptitude test, you still got to pick your own destiny. I mean, I would guess part of the transition planning that can be the hardest is when a student wants to do something that doesn't match their skills. And we have to have honest and hard conversations with families. And I don't think our IEP teams always do that very well, because it's difficult to say you can't be something. Nobody wants to put a ceiling on somebody else's potential, but I know there's cases about that too, where the district had written a transition plan that a student couldn't possibly access with their abilities. And so these conversations are tough, trying to figure out a future for somebody who doesn't really want to talk about their future. Sometimes the students don't. And then parents who may have a totally different expectation than what the kid really wants, which it's their live, goal. There's so much work to do in transition times for students. And I think it's sad that we feel like we have to do even more because our current, and this is speaking specifically to Central Washington, but we don't have a ton of adult disability supports. They're very difficult to get access to, it seems, and not very comprehensive. It's definitely a huge drop in service time from what you get in the school system. So there's just so much pressure on us to cover all the bases.
Which I think isn't.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just think it's an added layer of like how cool some of that, like the DVR and pre-ed stuff is. Like, I just think about, we were talking yesterday in a case that I don't know what her title is, transition specialist, was talking about. Thank you. I never know titles. Or someone asked, or Leanne asked, can you share some of the internships that you've supported this year? And there was like more than one case where she was talking about like, oh, and now this place is actually hiring this like current student going to be, done. And now they have a place of employment because of their access through this DVR internship.
Yeah. And that's the school, like us, trying to braid those funds of DVR and school systems and come up with something that works for kids. Otherwise, I'm not sure that students would have been plugged into that. So schools are really working hard.
They are. And we've made, I think the pathway was a great change for us.
Yes.
And it's still pretty new. I think lots of systems are still thinking about how can we kind of maximize that for kids. But, I think that discussion for families is we're not very good about a soft handoff to the adult world, right? Like you go all the way up to 18, and all along we've told you when you can go to the bathroom. We've told you when you can walk from class to class, right? And then we go, okay, best of luck to ya. Right. And I think how do we just talk more intentionally about what graduation means? And when we give that graduation stamp, that understanding that door is closed, right? It's like the aperture when you're in high school. I can do anything. I can do all these different things. There's nothing close to me. And as we make choices, things become closed. And I don't know that we always explain to parents that this is no longer an option once they accept that diploma or once we assign that diploma to them, and really being thoughtful about what that can mean for a student down the road.
I know this is not the case you were talking about, but in that case that's currently happening over in Western Washington, part of their argument is that like, well, this kid graduated with a 3.8, can't read and write. Two questions. No, just one, I guess. How does that happen?
Well, this kind of makes me think about our grading conversation yesterday, Leanne. Mm-hmm. We were talking, I kind of forget how it started, but we were talking about, we had our regional special ed director meeting yesterday, and the topic of grading came up, and how are you establishing ABCDF for students on an IEP? And so one director pointed out, like if they essentially show up, they should at baseline be a 50. And then their, like if their accommodation is they do 50% of the work, then they get that ABCD whatever on the 50% that they were supposed to have accomplished. But then other people had said that someone said they had a rubric, and then they were told by their district lawyer they can't go off of the rubric because then it's not equitable grading practices. At the end of the day, if your district lawyer is telling you that, they're the ones that are involved in the lawsuits and the due processes, so they're trying to protect you, right? Situations.
I understand from like a legal non-education perspective, the desire for equality and sameness. My frustration is that's not equitable. What equitable means, every kid gets what they need, right? And we're making the system fit to the individual needs. And like, there's all kinds of issues with it's almost like, I think maybe to answer my own question, it's almost like an ABCDF model is just not applicable anymore, right? There's a lot of work to be done on grading and assessment. Because can you tell me the difference in learning and competency between a 3.8 and a 3.75? No, you can't.
And
like,
that's how you get to that 3.8 with the first grade reading level.
It's just small little micro changes.
You also could get there because we will have kids that will graduate that will be non-readers. So one of those pathways is through a WAAIM, potentially. So they could graduate that way as a pathway.
I think it's also really odd sometimes that we think that all learning has to be maximized up until age 18 or 21 when we know that their brains are still developing until 25. There's just so much more time still to capture some of that learning, and kids could still be making gains in their reading as they get more
don't
developed.
Say that. When we reach 1 million people, they're going to say we have to keep them until 25.
I'm okay with
they'll be like,
being
schools, you should do this
post-high school option for kids. I really would love that. I just don't think we can do everything in K through 12. But I think, there's a lot more room for continuing to develop your brain and learn. And there are kids that their motivation doesn't start to really come to, mind until they actually are looking at paying their own bills or having this autonomy that comes with growing up. And then suddenly they're like, hey, I think I do want to learn to read and try harder. And it's not being done to them as much at a certain age as them seeking it out. But
it's part of school culture. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just grading is so problematic all over, but then to take a problematic system and put special ed law on top of it is impossible, in my opinion. But
it's part of educator culture. Like we are aware. We say it all the time. In the real world, like when you get in the real world, this is going to happen, and like it always bugs me. Not that I haven't said that to kids or say it to teachers now. Like when kids hit the real world, but it's like in our verbiage, we know that we're sheltering kids, and there's a need for that, in certain circumstances. Like you need that soft handoff. You don't want to just throw kids in the deep end from the get-go. But there does come a time where we're doing kids a disservice by sheltering them from some of the more tough realities. We say it all the time. You learn from failure. And then like oftentimes failure is the end of the learning for a lot of people when it should just be the beginning. And we don't have a system as a whole that's designed to support that kind of teaching. Individual teachers, I think, do a great job, but that's not what any of us went to pre-service education for. Whether or not we believe it now, that's a different kind of teaching because you've got a different type of world that you're preparing kids for. I know this is not the first time we've tread this line, but I think that's also not the first time I've said this. It's you've got special education who like their entire system is around meeting the individual needs, and that just needs to be the norm for gen ed. But the pushback you get on that is, well, no one's going to bend over backwards to meet your needs in the real world. Yeah, they do. Yeah,
yes,
I mean, the consequences sometimes can be swifter, but like we use that justification for like, well, you're going to get fired if your punctuation isn't. I hear that all the time when I work with ELA teachers. Well, if they get in the real world and they can't spell, or they don't know proper punctuation, or they can't cite their sources.
I'll just use my voice to text.
There you go. And again, not saying those things aren't important, but this myth that kids are just going to get slapped in the face and fired from every job and be unemployable because they don't have those skills is patently ridiculous. But it's easier for, I'll just speak from a ELA teacher's perspective, because that's what I was. It's easier for me to look at an essay and like that's one of the few things that's black and white. There should have been a period there and there's not. And so like I can assign a grade to that. And when I've got 30 kids a class, 6 classes a day, that's an insane amount of time. and an insane amount of kids to think about like personalizing on an individual level if we're not restructuring the system. But then by design, I am crippling my kids. Maybe I shouldn't use that term because it feels like maybe there's making the implication that schools are crippling kids, and they're not. Teachers are doing amazing things, but the system itself, by design, I think coddles kids, and then there is no soft handoff. Like we shouldn't even have to discuss a soft handoff. It should be a gradual release of responsibility to where like you've got a bunch of learning experts in the room working with your students, and to where at some point they are driving their own learning. Like you need someone to facilitate that and provide structures for that. But like doing everything for kids, I'm not saying the work itself, but like structuring their day like that does them no favors when we rubber stamp the graduation seal and we set them loose and like, you can't come back and now you're on your own. Well, we didn't do a good job of preparing you to be a well-rounded adult. We gave you a lot of like comprehensive content. And I know systems move slow and there's some steps in the right direction for this, but I guess then it doesn't super surprise me that there's more than one case where it's like, well, we hit the real world and you told us we were doing a good job in school, but you're comparing apples and oranges. It's an old,
and I think that's why for our students with disabilities, why we have post-school outcomes, right? Like that year out from high school is, are you engaged? Are you employed? Are you doing something? Or are you sitting in your parents' basement, maybe not employed? And I mean, those numbers, they're not great for us.
We had a conversation yesterday at the meeting, Darcy, about how many kids are taking a gap year and destroying our data for our post-secondary outcomes.
I want to know whose parents are supporting these gap years.
Won't be anybody in this house.
I had a different understanding of gap year. I thought gap year was specific to going to college. And I'm not sure it is anymore. It might just even be, I'm going to take a year before I even get a job. And
I mean, I've heard multiple adults say I'm taking an adult gap year. So I think you can just take a gap from anything these days.
Just like you can take a moon for anything.
We will accommodate that.
You can have a new house moon.
I'm going to take a gap year from parenting, Anna, if you could just...
Oh, good.
I'll come back
We're
when the little
not
one's
in a
not
stage of our life where I am going to be okay with that. There, in that Seattle Times, I had pulled this quote earlier because I was going to talk about it in my case, but since we're talking about it now, I won't. But there's a professor from Vanderbilt that's quoted in that Seattle Times article about the current case, and they said students receiving special education services meet the milestones for a regular high school diploma. They should, or if the students receiving the services meet the milestones for a regular diploma, they should get one. But that general education diploma can sometimes stop you from accessing services in adulthood that you need, including those transitional services designed to help you with education, life skills, and employment opportunities in long term that significantly affects their adult lives.
Yeah, I also think I've sat in many of those IEPs and recommending that kids not graduate doesn't go well.
No.
That's the norm benchmark.
And there is a rush to get to the finish line for kids, and telling them that you're going to move that finish line out is just about torture.
Oh, we can't end there.
I did look up gap year, though. Gap year is a structured period often taken between high school and college for personal growth, skill building, and experiential learning through volunteering, working, or travel. So staying at home on your parents' couch is not technically a gap year.
It's freeloading.
Yes.
I think you're just trying to retire. Like, what are you doing? You haven't even started your life yet. I think
I appreciate that there's so many kids that can do that. And I think if that's true and they're doing something that's actually falls in that gap year, then it should count as engagement.
Yeah, we'll have to argue.
I mean, if you're like, I'm traveling, I'm doing all these things, then there you go. That seems different than I'm really not employed and I'm sitting on the couch, still eating my parents' dinners.
I'm picking up life experience. I'm finally experiencing what it means to be on my own and not inside a school system. Like, there's no replacement for that. And if you can do it while you're young and there are very few consequences, it's better that than a midlife crisis.
Watch yourself now. Thanks for tuning in to Spedsplaining. If you've got questions or thoughts about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to our links where you can drop in your questions, join the conversation, and connect with us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode if you found it helpful. Until next time, stay curious, and Stefan will keep Spedsplaining.